Hello, hello, hello. Just looking between my two screens as you filter in. Hi Zoe. Hi Ella. Have I found my keys? Yes. So those haven't seen my debacle on my private Instagram. I lost my keys yesterday and had a bit of a nightmare. I had to cancel a class, but they have been found. They were in the post office all along. So again, I've got you on Zoom and I've also got you on Instagram. So I'll be looking back and forth between the two screens. And again, if you have any questions as we go through, pop them in the chat boxes. I will keep looking back and forth, and I promise to get to them by at least the end. If not, drop me a message afterwards and I will answer it privately to you. I know a lot of you already put forward some questions to me, so I've got them already included here today, so they'll be covered towards the end as well. Okay, so let's get my screen set up. Okay, so welcome to the deep dive. This is the last deep dive for a few weeks. So I've got a few busy weekends. I'll be jumping back in with some amazing topics going forward then in May. And today it's all about Noatropics, or Nootropics, I like to call them, but I think the right way to pronounce them is Noatropics. So we're going to go through what they are, what are the benefits of them, how do they work, and what nootropics, or what can we do in regards to dopamine, which is heavily linked to stress, anxiety, and depression. Examples of nootropics and where you can get them from, mainly from natural substances I'm going to disclose today rather than more synthetic made. Are they safe? We're going to go through, and can nootropics help with depression? And I said we've got some frequently asked questions which are in there, but another one I've been asked yesterday was, can nootropics help athletic performance, which is definitely my field, so I'm going to delve into that a little bit as well. So what are nootropics? Nootropics are smart drugs, and they can either be natural or they could be synthetic substances that are taken to improve mental performance or cognitive performance. They have gained popularity in today's kind of highly competitive society because we're all trying to be better, do better, be faster, X, Y, Z. So they're often used to boost memory, focus, creativity, intelligence, and also motivation. So by definition, a nootropic is a compound that increases mental function. This is basically another way to describe what I've just said. So they can increase mental functions, including memory, motivation, concentration, and attention. And like I said, there are two different types of nootropics under the umbrella term, which is synthetic, which is kind of lab made, and then there's natural ones that we, of course, we just get from plants. Things like ginkgo biloba, you might have heard of that. Caffeine is also, I mean, caffeine can be synthetically made, but that is also a nootropic, and we're going to go into caffeine a bit because I know a lot of us are big caffeine fans. So like I said, today we're going to go mainly into the natural side of things, and natural nootropics are proven in boosting the brain function while at the same time making the brain healthier. They act as a vasodilator, and what that means is they kind of open the veins, you know, they keep the arteries and everything nice and plump. I like, is the best way to describe it. An introduction of natural nootropics in the system will increase the blood circulation in the brain, and at the same time provide the important nutrients that is needed to increase energy and oxygen flow in the brain as well. So again, super important thing. So despite the brain only being about 3%, I think it's 2-3% weight of the total body, the brain actually requires, you know, between 15 to 20% of the brain's total blood and oxygen supply. So that's crazy. So for something that's so small, it needs a lot of energy, it needs a lot of support. But in contrast to other cells of the body, so we have neurons obviously in the brain, with these like neuroconnections. They cannot be reproduced, and they are kind of irreplaceable. Neuron cells are persistently and always kind of expending energy, and the energy they use is like glycogen, so from your carbs, guys, so keep eating your carbs. So the energy generated from the glucose or glycogen is crucial for maintenance of the brain, also electrical impulses and neurotransmittive purposes as well. So obviously we have these like synapses in the brain, we have these neuroconnections where like our pathways, and they kind of are forever needing energy to work. At the end of the day, our brain is always working. Even when we're asleep, our brain is still working. And the effect of natural nootropics is also shown to reduce the inflammation occurrence in the brain. And the administration of nootropics will protect the brain from toxins and minimizing the effects of aging. Now, I want you to really remember that, because we're going to go into Alzheimer's and dementia today a little bit, and how nootropics can actually be maybe really effective going forward in the future with science, in stopping the kind of degenerative nature of these diseases. So let's go into, again, we've gone over kind of roughly the benefits, but let's go through benefits. Enhance cognition and memory. Another benefit is they increase alertness and wakefulness. Another benefit of nootropics, hi those who are joining. Another massive benefit is they improve sleep quality. They boost attention as well, and like your attention to be present on something. They boost brain energy as well by stimulating blood flow to the brain cells, and they also improve various aspects of mood and mood disorders such as stress, anxiety, and even depression. And as I said, we'll go into dopamine later on. I will be doing a whole deep dive on dopamine though, because I love talking about dopamine. So this is really interesting. So if you think about herbs and spices, and if you look at Chinese medicine or Ayurvedic medicine, they say, if you take this herb, it'll do this, and people I think roll their eyes at it and think, is it really true? But there's actually studies showing the benefits to cognitive function with kind of natural substances, and these were in keeping with their traditional use. So for example, there's one done on rosemary, a herb we use to cook. I love it on my potatoes, on my roasties. And actually, if you look back at Shakespeare and King Lear, they talk about, he talks about memory in the writing, and how rosemary helps memory. And the studies have shown that rosemary actually does improve memory. So they knew this back then, and we don't really tend to know it as common knowledge today, but rosemary is shit hot for your memory. And the studies that were done, I'm not just plucking out some crap studies. They were carefully controlled and published in really well-respected journals. They had a really good placebo. All participants were blinded to the condition, so there was no bias. And they used standardized tests of memory to test how the memory improved after taking it. I don't know the ins and outs of how much rosemary was taken. I'll have to reread the study. I can't remember the ins and outs, but I can send it to you if you're interested. So that's something really interesting. And actually, in my own experience, I did my yoga teacher training in India, and I was having some really bad hormonal symptoms, like acne all of a sudden, problems with my menstrual cycle. I went to see the Ayurvedic doctor there, and he basically gave me a bag of seeds and said, make a tea and drink it for 2 weeks. And I kind of rolled my eyes. I did it, but I was kind of thinking, is this going to work? I've been seeing traditional doctors back home in the UK for 2 years, and I've not had any improvement. Is this guy really going to fix me with some herby tea? And yeah, he did. I went in there thinking it's not going to work, and it did. My skin cleared up amazingly. I'd lost my menstrual cycle. It came back within about a month. So I took it for 2 weeks, then came off it, and then they just came back. So it was incredible. So this is kind of why I'm going into natural nootropics, is because a lot of it we can get from plants. We don't need the synthetic versions. So let's go into dopamine. Let's touch on that. I say touch on that. I'm probably going to go through, I've got quite a lot of points, as you can see I've written down. That dopamine plays a really important role in movement, which not a lot of us realize, but also food preferences, learning, attention, habits, and of course mood, and other things as well. And dopamine has become kind of a part of mainstream culture. We talk about it a lot, and it's become a really popular research project as well in neuroscience. And although dopamine has been the focus of more than, I think it's 110,000 studies or something like that over the last 60 years, and research papers over the last 60 years, it still remains a massive source of kind of controversy among the medical community. And dopamine's popular definition differs depending on the context you're using it in, but scientifically speaking, it's a natural occurring brain chemical that can stimulate pleasure, euphoria, motivation, attention, and movement as well. And like I said, a lot of people know about the movement side of it. But a key point here I want you to think about is dopamine is labeled the kind of reward hormone, because the brain releases dopamine as a reward for taking steps towards reaching a goal. So without enough dopamine, obviously, then our motivation can decline. And that caused a decrease in pleasure received then from usually enjoyable tasks. So you can think about people with depression. We talk a lot about how when people are depressed, they don't enjoy the things they normally enjoy. And that's because this dopamine is declining, and they're not getting that same kind of reward when doing those exercises then. Or exercises, I'm using that as an example, but it could be a hobby or something like that. And also, when there is that decrease in dopamine, it, you know, affects not just enjoyable activities and hobbies, but it can be your sex drive, music, or even social interactions. Hence why when depressed, you can go into kind of your own little bubble and not want to be around people because it's not enjoyable anymore. And it's probably more stressful than it is anything else. And in addition, low dopamine levels have been implicated in impulse problems, but also with ADHD as well. And kind of since dopamine levels influence mood, proper dopamine levels and good cognition are closely linked. So if we've got, you know, good cognitive, you know, functions in our brain, then we tend to have good dopamine levels as well. But one drops, it can affect the other. And mood can impact more than cognitive performance, as I've said. So your mood can affect everything from kind of academic test results to job promotions to social relationships. It's not just kind of mood. When we are in, of course, like a more positive mental state, you are more likely to achieve your goals and desires, for example, whatever that might be. But if you're in a low mental state and lower dopamine levels, it can affect your ability to have the drive to do anything and to perform well in tasks, not just, I mean, an athletic basis, but I mean, perform as in like with mental tasks, like going into interviews or having those social interactions. So essentially having a constantly sour mood can kind of keep you back from reaching your goals and having the life you want as well. Do they know if low dopamine leads to depression or depression drops dopamine? That's really, thanks for that, Lowry. I'm going to actually send you a little paper to read after this. I say a paper, I've taken bits from it that are interesting, otherwise I'll talk to you for ages about it. It is sometimes hard to know in regards to that question if it's what's causality and what's correlation. So I will send you and you can make up your own mind about it. I personally am on the fence. I think it works both ways. I think obviously if you have low dopamine levels, it's going to lead to depression, definitely. I'm not sure. I think in order to be depressed, or from my perspective, and I'm not an expert in this, I think dopamine has to have dropped for you to feel depressed, but I'm sure there's many scientists out there, I'm not a neuroscientist, but that will say actually there's other things that can put you in a depressive state, which can then in turn drop your dopamine level. So I'll send you some information over afterwards. You can have a little look through, and if anyone else wants that, let me know and I'll forward it. But let's go into the movement side of dopamine, because again, I wasn't actually aware of this until I really looked into it. But since movement often leads to kind of perceived reward, movement is closely linked to motivation as well. We talk about, you know, how do I get motivated for the gym? And we talk about, or to run, or to work out, or to move my body. But dopamine also does affect motivational levels. And it's kind of like a horrible domino effect then, because exercise is one of the best things for depression. It really is up there. Like diet and exercise are one of the top things when it comes to a lot of mental well-being things. I mean, I'm not just saying if you're depressed, go for a run, you're going to be better, because I know that's not true, but it has a massive impact long term. I mean, one run isn't going to fix anything, or one workout, but which again I'll go into later. But when like I said, if we are depressed or really stressed or anxious or whatever you want to resonate with there, then our dopamine levels can drop, or will be dropped, or be already lower, and that reduces our ability to motivate ourselves to then go and do something. And then because you haven't got the motivation, you feel down that you haven't got the energy to do X, Y, and Z, then you maybe feel more depressed, and it kind of goes round and round and round and round. So without motivation, basically physical activity can seem undesirable, impossible, while laying on the couch can feel like a more rewarding activity. And this is the really fine line. You know, I always say to people, make sure you've got your self-care, make sure you've got your self-care. But I am really bad at, when I'm really stressed, I will wallow in that stress and I'll allow myself, you know, an afternoon just to relax, which might be watching Netflix, which is rare that I do it, but I do. But it's really hard then when you're in that kind of state of, you know, binge watching Netflix in my example and chilling out, you're kind of rewarding yourself because you're like, this is good, you know, I've taken some time, I've listened to my body and my mind, and I've rested. But then you're rewarding yourself, and then maybe you're getting a bit of dopamine from that. So then you don't want to go and exercise because you want to stay in that place of being on the sofa, because that is rewarding, whereas going for a run all of a sudden isn't rewarding. I'm just using a run as an example. I'll probably use that going forward, but it could be anything. It could be going to do your uni work, or going to do this task or that task. So dopamine produced, so I'm going to use a couple of brain words and stuff, is produced in the substantia nigra, and I'm probably pronouncing a lot of these wrong, so I'm crap with Latin. So apologies to any science buffs on here. Feel free to correct me because I'm terrible. Things that when I talk about norepinephrine, I'm always saying it wrong. But anyway, so it's produced in the substantia nigra and plays an important role in helping initiate movement. So a decline in dopamine producing cells in this brain region can result in loss of executive functions that can drive movement and motivation. So if you are struggling with your motivation, utilizing nootropics to boost your dopamine levels can be massively important. And I know some of you that I spoke to about, I said I'm not really talking about synthetic neurotropics today, but some of you will get nootropics through prescription drugs as well, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But there's numerous studies that have shown that boosting dopamine can improve your cognitive function, including movement and motivation to do things as well. So just going to quickly go, again, it's hard to know, am I dopamine deficient? But fit a little couple of symptoms, which doesn't definitely mean you have got it, by the way. So don't I'm not, diagnosing you here, but things like decreased motivation, procrastination, fatigue, mood swings, poor memory, inability to focus, impulsive behaviors, and addiction. And I mean, I've gone through all of those things at some point in my life, but they're not chronic. So if you're, I have mood swings some days, I'm a hormonal woman, I have poor memory sometimes when I'm tired. I have the inability to focus. I have an addictive personality. I know that, I go into something and I go hard on it. But I wouldn't say I suffer with depression. So again, don't diagnose yourself from that. It's just, if that's something you experience chronically and over long periods of time, then maybe it's time to reach out to somebody if you haven't already. So I'm going to brush over this very quickly because I could talk about dopamine for ages, but just some things you can start to do, quite simple things, but they are really overlooked to help with dopamine and to get it to a nice stable level and keep it regular. One is reduce your sugar intake. Basically, sugar can disrupt dopamine levels. This is not a fun one because I love chocolate, but it can, and when it disrupts your dopamine levels, it can cause an unnatural and highly addictive sugar high. And sugar stimulates the same kind of pathways targeted by alcohol and drugs as well. So limiting your sugar intake to reduce cravings and protect natural dopamine levels is one way you can do this. So if you struggle with a sweet tooth like myself, there's something called chromium picoleante. I'm going to say that wrong. I will put it in the comments in a second. But, so yeah, chromium picoleante, maybe supplements can help decrease sugar cravings. Or if you're like me, I try when I'm really struggling with sugar cravings, and I do get them massively, instead of having sweets and chocolate, I'll start to go to fruit, so I'll get that sugariness, dates and bananas usually, and then I try and wean myself off them. I am a sugar addict. I'm going to hold my hands up. Second one, in regards to helping with dopamine levels, again, not a fun one, limit your caffeine. I'm going to go into caffeine a little bit later, some really interesting facts I've got on that. But like sugar, coffee gives you a kind of a temporary energy boost, but it can deplete dopamine in the long run. Way to combat this, if you just love coffee, the taste of coffee, then switching to decaf can help. Not so fun, I know, sorry, I'm here to be the bearer of bad news today. Or things like, I have a lot of matcha. It has got caffeine in, but I find it's got other benefits that help counteract that kind of slump with coffee. Another one is set a healthy routine. One easy way to boost dopamine is to follow a regular sleep pattern. Boring, I know, but it is a way. And ideally, we say in 24-hour day cycle, we should have about 8 hours of sleep. This is different for everyone, 7 to 8 hours. I have about 7.5, so I'm kind of bang in the middle. But irregular sleep cycles combined with lack of exercise can drain your dopamine levels. So that's really interesting to know, especially if you're a shift worker, which is really hard to regulate your sleep sometimes, and also your diet. It's something to look into and see if there's a way you can manage that, or even stop night shifts or something, because it can really mess your dopamine levels. Another one is decrease your stress levels, quite obvious, but dopamine deficiency is related to high stress levels. Again, cause and effect here. It's not definitive, but whilst you can't always control your circumstances, you can't always control stress around you, of course, you can also, of course, find ways or create your toolbox to manage stress in a healthier way. Next one is magnesium. Magnesium deficiency can lower your dopamine levels. And I think experts have estimated, I'm going to go from American point of view, I think like over half of Americans, I think it is, don't get enough magnesium. I couldn't get a straight figure for the UK, so I'm going to use America from their diet. But common symptoms of magnesium deficiency include salt or carb cravings, which again, we all get, especially me, high blood pressure, constipation, rapid heartbeat. I think it's sore muscle, like fatigue as well. That's why we use your Epsom salts for baths to help soothe sore muscles. Also, poor mood and headaches as well can be linked to that, and anxiety actually to low magnesium. So check your magnesium intake. And then lastly, to combat dopamine would be vitamins, and the antioxidants contained in vitamin C and E protect brain neurons that use dopamine. So we're just helping the things that work on dopamine. So taking like a high quality multivitamin can help, or just making sure you're getting a lot of variety in your diet to make sure you're getting those antioxidants in. And essentially antioxidants, we produce a lot of waste in the body, especially from burning working in ATP. So when you have antioxidants, they can kind of squash and kind of clear up, mop up free radicals that can be quite damaging. Essentially that's that. So I want to go into a couple of substances that are like we could bring under the term of natural nootropics. So first one, because it's one of those, you know, used by us all, is caffeine. And it's essentially a stimulant, as we all know, has a half-life of about 4 hours, meaning, you know, 4 hours it'll start to decline until another 4. And it's a very clear example of kind of an acute cognitive enhancer. So it's not like you drink coffee and you're constantly wired then, you know, you're up and you're down. So it's not like a long-lasting effect unless you, of course, keep on taking caffeine. And there are substances, however, that you can take over a longer period of time that protect the brain against cognitive decline and possibly dementia. So like caffeine's not one of them. It's like, you know, up and down, whereas there are substances you can take, or Noatropics you can take, that over time actually protect the brain. And this is really interesting. Caffeine is actually a vasoconstrictor, which means it decreases blood flow and narrows your blood vessels. Not so great. There's 2 reactions when we have caffeine. There's like a chemical reaction in this, and then there's this vasoconstrictive property as well. So basically, there's when we take caffeine, I'm drinking it now, I've got my matcha, or matcha. And when we take it, basically, there's a bit of a fight between the chemical reaction going on and the blood flow effect. So essentially the chemical effect wins, but that has consequences in that there's also this vasoconstrictive kind of property or effect going on, is a better word. But, well, before I go into the but actually, also caffeine, the stimulant of caffeine, blocks adenosine, which is an inhibitory neurotransmitter in the brain, which makes you sleepy. So that's why coffee keeps you awake, because the caffeine kind of molecule and the I can never say it, adenosine molecule are very similar. And, you know, if you like to think of the brain, we have these little gates, like lock and key. You can think of, you know, there being these locks, and then caffeine can come in and put the key in that lock, and then it's taken up that kind of bond there, which means the other key that wants to come into that one can't. So it stops us getting sleepy, and that's how caffeine works. It just blocks that, it inhibits that neurotransmitter. So it stops you getting sleepy. But the good thing with coffee, so when we have caffeine, we don't just have like a caffeine tablet. We have caffeine in combination with something else, and that's when you can think of coffee and your teas. So caffeine on its own is a vasoconstrictor, but when it's in coffee, it's actually a vasodilator, because coffee, for example, I think it contains chlorogenic acids, which are vasodilators, which expand the blood vessels and which helps the effects of caffeine to some degree. So they kind of balance out slightly. However, if you have decaf coffee, that could be better in regards to vasodilation, because you're only getting the things that expand the blood vessels, so you're not getting that constriction as well. That's just a little interesting fact, that caffeine is actually not so great, but when it's combined, when it's not bad, I don't want to put it's bad, but it has its limitations. But when it's in like coffee and tea, because we have these flavonoids, we have this chlorogenic acids, then it's actually it's a lot better. Another thing I want to talk about is L-Theanine. This actually increases alpha waves in the brain, contributing to a relaxed yet kind of alert mental state. I like to think of L-Theanine as like the thing that gets you into a flow state, you know, when everything's just flowing really well and you're bossing things and like you're getting creative and you're just, you know, you're boshing out, I don't know, whatever you might be boshing out that day. And it's actually an amino acid, which we have to get because we can't produce it ourselves. And it's found in green tea. So it's in my matcha right now. Also some mushrooms. And the good thing with L-Theanine is it can cross the blood-brain barrier, which can also increase your dopamine levels. So it kind of all ties in here. It's a natural antidepressant and anti-anxiety effects as well. And it can reduce the symptoms of mental and physical stress and also improve your memory and learning. And in addition to increasing dopamine and other brain chemicals that kind of promote feelings of calm, L-Theanine reduces brain chemicals that are linked to stress and anxiety. So all the more reason to drink a tea. And helping to protect brain cells against the long-term effects of stress and aging as well. So L-Theanine can actually stop or slow down age-related neural damage. And you can think of things then like Alzheimer's and dementia. So it's really, really cool. And a single dose, I think, of L-Theanine is about 100 milligrams, and that is enough, as low as 100 milligrams, sorry, is enough to significantly improve attention and focus compared to a placebo, which is a pretty cool study I read about. One more I'll talk about here, you might know it, is Rhodiola rosea. I'm going to call it RR because I cannot pronounce half of these most of the time. Or it's also known as golden root, and it's a popular plant used in traditional medicine across Eastern Europe and Asia. And some of its benefits include boosting mood, increasing energy, enhancing your working performance, and reducing the symptoms of physical and mental stress. So a lot of these do the same things. And rhodiola exerts kind of multiple effects on the central nervous system as well, including improving dopamine stability, again, dopamine coming in there, and reducing the symptoms of physical and mental stress, again, very similar to your L-Theanine. And there's actually evidence from human studies, and really important when you think about human studies, because a lot of things are tested on animals and don't always, shift over to humans as much as we'd like them to. But evidence from human studies has suggested that rhodiola can significantly reduce feelings of depression, anxiety, and stress-related fatigue compared to the placebo. So really, really cool. So there's other ones, things like ginkgo biloba. I'm not going to go into deep dive into that, but improves your brain function. I used to take it, meant to help your memory, and it did. I don't take it at the minute, but something I definitely would put back into my system. Also ginseng. This is really good, preventing certain brain diseases, including Alzheimer's, Huntington's, and Parkinson's. Creatine as well. So a lot of gym goers will take creatine. I used to take it when I was weightlifting. It can really help with short-term memory and reasoning. And the only caution with that is there's limited research available on whether the supplement is safe for adolescent athletes. But as of adult athletes, absolutely. Something called ashwagandha, again, probably saying it wrong. It's something you've probably seen about people take these supplements of ashwagandha, and it actually reduces stress and anxiety. And it can help the formation of new dendrites, and it modulates like GABA. So I'm going to try and pronounce GABA. It's gamma aminobutyric acid pathways in the brain, and helps in neuronal longevity. So it's really good for your pathways in the brain. So going on to the brain, what am I going to cover? I'm going to go over the hippocampus part of the brain, because it's really, really important. And then I'll go into some Q&A that I've been asked. So within our brain, we have lots of different parts, and within, like deep in the brain, we have the hippocampus. And I want to talk about exercise and diet, because it's essentially so important. We all know this. We're all so aware that we should eat, this, that, and the other, and we should exercise to keep ourselves fit and healthy. But a lot of the time, we kind of put it around looking a certain way or losing weight is a lot of the emphasis on diet and exercise. But actually, one of the most important things for brain health is your diet and exercise. Ooh, shock. And the hippocampus is what I'm going to talk about, and it's a complex brain structure which is kind of embedded really deep in the temporal lobe, like in here. I can't even point to it, it's inwards. It has a major role in learning and memory, and it is plastic. And by plastic, I don't mean it's a piece of plastic. When I talk about plastic or neuroplasticity, it's the ability for things to change. So a common thing you might hear me say on these deep dives or on my page is cells that fire together, wire together. So when we're utilizing the same thoughts, we kind of strengthen those thoughts, and the ones we don't strengthen, we don't use, we kind of lose. Think about gym gains. If you want to get bigger in the gym, or you want to get faster running, you've got to be consistent, you've got to work hard, you've got to overload your muscles or start to run a little bit faster, chuck some sprints in here and there. And it's the same with our brain. If we want to improve our brain and we want to change the way we think, we have to work on it, daily, we really do. And that's what plasticity is. But so the hippocampus is very plastic. But the problem with the hippocampus is it's quite a vulnerable part of the brain, and it gets damaged by a variety of stimuli. Studies have shown that it also gets affected in a variety of neurological and psychiatric disorders. So there's a really interesting study which was done on London taxi drivers. And before GPS, way before we had sat navs and we had Google Maps and Apple Maps on our phones, in order to be this London taxi driver, you had to do a test. It was very kind of, what's the word? Like, not like a secret test, but it wasn't, it was kind of like, it was called the knowledge test. That's what it's called. It's kind of mysterious, the knowledge test. And what the test was essentially saying to a driver who was, you know, wanting to be a taxi driver, right, in London, I want you to get from, I really don't know London well, say from Mayfair to Hammersmith. I don't know if they're close, they're probably quite close, but say one end of London to the other, east to west, 2 points. I want to get from there to there on a map. Without a map though, what is the most efficient route? How do you get there the quickest? So they will just be asked that. They have no maps, they have nothing to go on. They just have to know from their spatial memory of how to get from A to B in the most efficient and quickest time and safest way as well. And like I said, here they're working their spatial memory, which is housed within our hippocampus. And the really interesting thing was that taxi drivers had a bigger hippocampus or hippocampal volumes than the rest of the population. And now you can't infer like causality. So, you know, does being a taxi driver mean that you have a bigger hippocampus, or is those people with bigger hippocampal volumes drawn to being a taxi driver? I would say it is the first, you know, like being a taxi driver and using that spatial memory does improve your hippocampal volumes. But, you know, seems legit, I would say. But like I said, the hippocampal volume is really important for memory, and it does shrink with aging. There was something I read recently, but I'm not sure how accurate it is, so I'm not going to state the actual figures, but it was something on the lines, after a certain age, it declines by like it can decline 1 to 2% a year, which is a shit ton. But there's obviously things you can do to counteract that, which we're going to go into. So the thing with the hippocampus is it's very, very vulnerable and sensitive to lifestyle factors. And the most important lifestyle change that can have the biggest effect on the brain is exercise, and more specifically aerobic exercise. So exercise can increase nootropic factors. And I want to talk about something called Bdnf, which is brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And it's one of the like kind of major stimulators in the brain of something called synaptogenesis, which is essentially the formation of synapses. We have synapses in the brain. It kind of looks like where our kind of messages are kind of channeled across. They're kind of the points of contact where information is transmitted between neurons. A bit of science there. So exercise is really important for the brain health. Again, it's stuff we already know, maybe or maybe not, but it's really important that you move your body. And like I said, aerobic exercise is one of the best for helping the hippocampal volumes. Even just walking, you know, is good enough here. So I just want to put a little bit of emphasis on this. You know, it doesn't have to be I'm going to the gym or I'm walking to lose weight. Sometimes that's what we center it around, but it's really good for our brain health. And that's one of the reasons now that I train. I used to train to look a certain way. Now I do it because I feel good in my body physically, but also I know I'm improving my brain health and function long term. And which is quite interesting, you know, when people retire, we start to see a decline in their cognitive function. And it could be that they're doing less, you know, they're not moving around, maybe their job was quite active, so they're not moving around as much. And that can then cause the hippocampal volumes to decrease. So, you know, it's something to really consider. Another one, again, is diet. So another very important factor in regards to the brain. And when we look at diet, or what the ideal diet kind of is for our brain, it's, you know, it's whole foods, it's brightly colored veggies and fruits, you know, it's the berries, especially because they're full of antioxidants, which, like I said, can kill free, like mop up is a better word, mop up free radicals, stopping any kind of inflammation. Essentially the Mediterranean diet. Now, I don't eat meat, but, you know, fruit, basically good oils, few processed foods, oily fish, fruit and veg, you know, boring but standard, that is the best. And also small amounts of red wine, most importantly, and the most interesting to myself. And this actually seems to give protection to the brain. There's actually studies being done. They haven't finished yet. They're in kind of, you know, they're going through them now in Australia on they're observing mentally well people that have gone into some kind of maybe home or apartments, and looking at how they can improve their hippocampal volumes through a Mediterranean diet and walking every day or every other day. So I'm really interested to see what comes out of that and see if they can either reverse any aging effects in the brain, or whether they can just stop the age or slow down the aging of the brain. But the Western diet that a lot of us, you know, do follow, without even realizing, isn't so neuroprotective, and it tends to be actually really damaging to the brain, and particularly to the hippocampus. It has actually been shown in studies, unfortunately, that the Western diet is associated with smaller hippocampal volumes. So that's pretty scary. Obviously, we can't see our hippocampus unless we go through some brain imagery work, but it literally can decrease the volume of your hippocampus. And as I said, the hippocampus with age, as we go on to get to a certain age, it does start to decline anyway. So we want to do our best whilst we can to keep on top of this. And one thing that, again, is widely used in diets, which is really good for hippocampus function, is cucumin, which is in turmeric. So we know turmeric's good for inflammation. So get that in your diet where you can. There are lots of controversial ways on how to take it. You know, you have to say, some say you have it with pepper and with like a fat sauce. So that's how I do it. Haven't really looked into it, but I always try my best to make sure if I have turmeric, I have it with a fat sauce, like coconut oil or something, and also some cracked black pepper as well, just to help with the absorption of it, essentially. So let's drop into some frequently asked questions I have received. And if you have any more, please feel free. I'm just going to check the chat box on Zoom. All good there, all good. Just smiley faces. Smiley face to you all too. So are nootropic or nootropics or noatropics effective in pain management? So briefly, yes, they can be, absolutely. So some nootropic drugs, this is more of a synthetic one made in a lab, piracetam, I think it's called, can have analgesic and anti-inflammatory properties. And pain and inflammation are due to the migration of immune cells that we have in the body and oxidative stress at a particular site. So when I hurt myself, you know, I have cells going there and there's a bit of oxidative stress, and that gives me that pain or inflammation or both. Piracetam can suppress or could suppress the immune system, the immune cells, and remove the free radicals, again, bringing them up, mop them up, that cause oxidative stress. And studies have actually reported that the analgesic action of piracetam could be due to the stimulation of certain receptors at the spinal levels, actually, rather than the brain, which is pretty cool. Another one I was asked was, are they safe? You know, are they like illegal? And natural nootropics, as far as I'm aware, in regards to like athletic capabilities and competing, I believe they wouldn't come up as something illegal, but you might have to look into anything synthetic you take. Nootropics are safe if you have awareness of risks and how to avoid them. So one thing I will say with some nootropics, even the natural ones, if you're having them with prescription drugs, it's always good to check. You know, certain things can basically, what a lot of the time the problem is, if you're having a synthetic drug that you've been given maybe on a prescription, and then you're taking some other substance, it can maybe work on the same receptors in the brain, which could then decrease the efficiency of the drug you need to take for something. So it's always obviously best to check with your doctor if you're bringing anything new into your diet, or you're going to start maybe a nootropic protocol for yourself. Just check any labels, basically. And to avoid these, obviously, maybe start with smaller doses and just see how you go. Everyone's different. Now, this is I think it's the last question I've got. Let's have a look. Pretty much, yeah. Well, I've got one, so I'll go on. I've got two more to go. One is how can nootropics be effective in depression, and also with athletes. I'll go depression first, because I know some of you might not care about the athletic side, and I'll do that last. You can always jump off if needed, because as always, I'm keeping you here forever and a day. So in regards to nootropics with depression, now, let's first go through the symptoms of depression briefly: lack of self-esteem and confidence, inability to focus, feelings of guilt, persistent fatigue, obviously low mood, negative outlook on life and your future, thoughts of self-harm or even suicide, too much or not enough sleep, loss of appetite or excessive eating, trouble making decisions, and memory issues as well. Again, just because you may experience these, all of them or none, doesn't mean you are struggling with depression. Of course, you'll reach out to somebody and chat if you're not sure. But as you can see, depression obviously can seriously impact mood balance, motivation, focus, sleep patterns, and more. But nootropics can help with these things. And as it turns out, addressing depression itself may not actually fix the cognitive deficits you might be experiencing. So again, this comes back to, like you mentioned, Larry, earlier on your question, like with dopamine and stuff, which is cause that, you know, which causes which. And even though we might fix depression, or you might not fix it, but be working on depression, you can't just fix it. You might get to an understanding there, but internally you might not make any differences. So it's important to address both the depression, like outwardly symptoms, the external symptoms, but also look at cognitive function as well. So this comes back to something I briefly mentioned, which was Bdnf, which is brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And it's basically a protein that influences learning and memory. And studies show that stress and depression are linked to reduced Bdnf activity in the brain. And obviously, not to mention, depression does negatively affect learning and memory as well. And thus, if we increase BDNF activity with Neurotrophics, for example, then that may help reduce stress and improve learning and memory in depressed people. And specifically, it may have a kind of greater impact on those with major depressive disorder, or MDD. And then we've also got something called NGF, which is nerve growth factor. And similarly, nerve growth factor, or NGF, is another neurotrophic protein that can impact symptoms of depression. So for example, there's a study that showed low levels of NGF are linked to MDD, or major depressive disorder. And in addition, changes in levels of NGF have been linked to cognitive functioning in depression and other mental disorders. So as such, we think that manipulating nerve growth factor may help with cognitive symptoms of depression, but there does need to be more research on this, I will reiterate. Things that can help with depression, and with depression, I mean, these can help the BDNF and the nerve growth factor as well, is things like L-Theanine. This one I really struggle to say, is phosphorylterazine, something like that. Vitamin B6, vitamin B9, vitamin B12 as well. Also lion's mane mushroom. And just expanding on that, because again, a lot of us hear about this lion's mane mushroom but don't know much about it. It is a mushroom. It has a nootropic ingredient that has shown to be has the potential to reduce symptoms of anxiety and depression in human clinical research, again, studies on humans. And whilst this mushroom may not be most known for its ability to promote nerve growth factor, its mechanism for action for supporting healthy mood remains unknown. But it works, but they're still trying to figure out the hows and whys behind it. So if you have any questions on depression, and again, I could deep dive into that for a full bloody hour, but that's just a kind of touching on it. Now, last one, which is going to be my longest one because it's really my jam, is Noatropics for athletes. So how can Noatropics help athletes? And basically by improving cellular energy, or ATP production, and increasing the circularity of oxygen flow. That's basically how they can help. And Nootropics may legally, importantly, and safely improve athletic stamina, but whilst also promoting a healthy anabolic metabolism as well. So, like I said, they may help athletes physically, especially physically active competitors, or even just exercisers, people that don't compete in anything but exercise. It can help you overcome the mental barriers as well, preventing you from realizing your full athletic potential. So again, these work on the brain, so it can help with brain and our perspective on things as well. So the answer is yes, they can improve athletic performance. But it's not straightforward. You take them and it's going to make you better, of course. You know, you're not going to suddenly go from a 30-minute 5K to a 20-minute 5K. But after all, many athletes, the mind games like prior to game day or a race, especially from my own perspective, are just as important to address as well as your physical fitness and your physical health. So whilst not all nootropics may help with athletic performance, they may work by enhancing the following cognitive benefits. So things like energy and stamina. They can help motivation and intensity. They can help attention and multitasking. They can help stress management, again, very important. And again, I could break that down a lot more, but we'll just go over that. But what I want to touch on is some pathways. So nootropic enthusiasts like myself have kind of reconcile the psychological, so the brain stuff, with the physiological, more the body stuff. And with that in mind, nootropics can help improve both physical performance by enhancing the following brain pathways. And there's three pathways. There's the dopaminergic, which is dopamine pathway, which is associated with the reward chemical of dopamine. And this pathway system manipulates motivation and the pleasure response. So this can really help in rewarding positive athletic behaviors, basically. Then there's the serotonergic pathway, thinking about serotonin. So low serotonin contributes to low inhibition. So as this neurochemical plays a key role in establishing impulse, inhibition, and discipline. So we can work on that with nootropics to improve that for athletic response. And then lastly is the, again, you're gonna laugh at my pronunciation, cholinergic pathway. And this is directly involved in the neuromuscular junction. Signals for muscular contractions, and kind of operates as the bridge chemical between nervous and muscular tissue. So basically we can enhance these pathways and make them better through nootropics. And again, I'm going to be repeating some of the similar ones I've already mentioned. So RR, rhodiola rosea, helps by tackling stress and fatigue, works as a performance enhancer for both brain and body. And there's one called NALT or N-acetyltyrosine, L-tyrosine, which ignites intensity during exercise and replenishes mood and focus after an intense workout. Again, I've got studies for this if anybody wants me to send them over. There's something called CDP choline, which 1 part choline and 1 part cytidine. And this can enhance brain power, and the cholinogenic connection between mind and muscle. There is one more, L-theanine, but in combination with caffeine. While it's not like a true nootropic, caffeine may possess performance enhancing benefits when coupled with L-theanine, which is the amino acid I spoke about earlier. And again, sourced from green tea, so I've always got matcha or something of the like. And we'll forget B vitamins, of course, often supplemented for mood boosts. B vitamins support hundreds of metabolic pathways across the brain and body. Again, if you want any further information on that, I can happily send it over. So that is it. I don't think I have any more questions to go through. Sorry, press the wrong button, just checking I've got no more questions. Again, a lot of information to get through in those 45 minutes. Again, I could have gone for longer. So if you do have any questions, feel free to send them over. And thank you for listening and joining. Again, it's such an interesting topic. I actually I'm in the process of testing out some nootropic teas, not the one I'm drinking now, but I'm going to see how they go, and if I think they're worth sharing with you guys, I'm going to share, hopefully get a discount code for you. I won't promote anything I don't really believe in, so I want to test it myself and see how it improves my cognitive function. And other things I'd like to see if it improves. I'll keep you updated, and like I said, I'm waiting for some more free samples. If anybody wants any free samples, drop me a message. I don't know how many I'm going to have yet. I've already got a couple of you that are on my list, but once I've got them, I can see how many I've got spare, and I can forward them on to anyone that might be interested in taking them. Like I said, they're all natural nootropics from teas, things like limeade, mushroom, and things like that will be included in them. So I'll let you know how they go. I'm not sure how they taste yet, the ones I'm waiting for the samples for. So I will also taste test for you guys as well. But thank you. Have an awesome weekend. Like I said, we haven't got one next week. I am racing. I've got lots on, but keep your eyes peeled for the next date starting back in May. We have so many topics I've already planned to do, but if you have any more you'd like me to cover, just drop me a message. Thank you.